Back with One More Down. Today we have the pleasure of talking to Mr. Darryl Kimbrough, uh, class of 1975 out of North High School. Played for the Bulldogs as a center and defensive tackle, but got his start on the Southside, Youngstown, Ohio. So it's a pleasure to have you on, Mr. Kimbrough, and get a chance to talk about your life experience and your football journey and give us some perspective on what being a North Bulldog was like in the mid 70s there. So welcome to One More Down.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you. It's an honor for me. As you know, when you called me, I said, "Well, hey, there was a lot of other guys in town that had far stellar careers, but I'm glad to be a part of it."
Well, we're glad to have you, and I'm glad that you said that because this podcast and these discussions and these experiences they're not relegated to levels of achievement and performance as much as they are in talking to good solid individuals and what that impact of the game of football and growing up in a place like Youngstown, Ohio does for young men. So
Hmm.
whatever you felt personally about your exploits, uh, they are yours and it's your story, and nobody else has that. So your
Yeah.
story is equally as important and it's equally as great as anyone else who's ever put on a helmet, strapped up a chin strap, and
Hmm.
laced it up on those fields.
Yep.
So to get started, if you would you give us a little bit of information on your origin stories as far as your parents and
Sure.
just growing up?
Sure. I'm, as you know, from the South Side, born on the South Side. My parents, my mother is well, everyone called her Vernie Kimbrough, uh, and my father is Raleigh Kimbrough. Very blessed to still have my dad. Lost my mom about 30 some odd years ago, but I I come from some extraordinary people. My mother, for example, she was sick um, a good portion of my childhood, but the one thing that she did that she never let her illness hold her down, and even to the fact that at the age of 50, and she was totally blind. She went back to college up at YSU and became the president of the non traditional student union. And unfortunately, she passed about 4 months before she was supposed to walk across the stage with that diploma. But what showed me was the impact that she had on a lot of people, as well as myself and people in the community. So, and my dad is my dad. He's been one of the individuals that's always had me learning how to do things as far as working with my hands, inventing things. I can remember as a child, there was a machine called a mango, and my great grandmother used to churn ice cream, and we ended up working together. I think I was about 4 or 5 years old, and took a motor from that old machine and turned her ice cream churner into automated. And so, from that standpoint, my father went on to form Microsystems Soft Incorporated, and had a 30-year run with a computer company here in the Washington D.C. area. So, um, as you can say, I come from an extraordinary family.
That's tremendous. Now, when you bring up those memories of your mother
Hmm.
and her dealing with her challenges but persevering
Hmm.
and structuring her life in a way where she didn't let those challenges hold her back. What type of impact does that have on you in terms of achieving or accomplishing goals?
Well, to know that regardless of where you're at the particular point of your journey or of your journey, that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be at the end. And so she showed me how to have patience, and sometimes it was hard to have that when things weren't working your way. But she was always, an individual to make you think outside of your norms. When you lose a certain sense, you gain that people have. You gain in someplace else. And I'll share with you. Right now, you're in Youngstown, and about to be involved in a winter storm, and it's down here in the Washington D.C. area. It's going to go into freezing, and it's done a lot of raining. And so my mother would ask me to describe to her how the branches would look, uh, and and then I would give her descriptions. Well, oh, it's ice on the limbs, and it would form around the leaf, and so it opened your eyes up to other things in life that normally people take for granted. Um, she taught us not to take those things for granted.
Mm. Now, does that give you a sense of compassion for others when you have a parent or a relative that is dependent on you in that way to provide a bridge between what their challenge is and what the quote unquote uh, uh, non-disabled person gets to enjoy and sometimes, like you said, take for granted?
Yeah, well, you know, as a child, it helps you to mature a lot faster. Okay, um, when you have to help your parent, in some cases, shows you where a lot of times they would have parties, and I couldn't go, and I didn't want to go because I didn't want to leave my mom alone. And and my friends used to always understand that, to be someplace that they want to go, and I wasn't able to go. They didn't hold that against me, and a lot of times they would stay on my front porch just to be with me because they knew that I had to be there to take care of my mom.
That's the great thing about what Youngstown was and the way that city was set up, and
Oh yeah.
being able to have that stability and develop those relationships,
Hmm.
with your peers. We've had a couple guys on that I grew up with, and I have 45 plus years of memories with those guys, and we've all seen each other transition from little boys to young go-getters to athletes to parents, and now we're seeing our own children become adults and move on into that next phase. And then I'm blessed to have both of my parents still around, but they're at that cusp of 80,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden I'm faced with having to come to terms with my father not being that swift athlete and big presence that he was, and my mom not being full of energy, but enjoying watching them in their maturity and their elder age, and that slowdown and that wisdom that comes with it.
Yeah.
I don't take that for granted at all. So I thank you
Hmm.
for sharing that part of your upbringing with me and Dallas here.
Okay.
How old were you when you lost your mom?
33.
Okay.
Yeah, 33 when I lost my mom. And that was an experience we never expected it, but the mere fact, again, her influence, um, and what she meant to a lot of people in the Youngstown area was something to behold. and so I'm really proud of that from that standpoint.
So when you are coming off of the porch per se, and you're getting out into the neighborhood, and
Oh yeah.
running around with your buddies,
Mhm.
take us into that. Who are those guys that you're forming those bonds and those relationships with in those early days on the South Side?
Well, right now, and I'm still friends with them. Eddie Thomas. We just lost one of our friends, Jody McCullough. Uh, Jody played at Mooney, Michigan State grad. And Calvin Miller, Reg Miller. Reg lived across the street from me, and so Reg and I, in I think it was 1974, decided to start a little league team called the Youngstown Penguins, and so those were some of the guys. But there was a lot, but Eddie Thomas and Jody, Calvin Miller, Reg Miller, those would consider my closest friends.
Well, I know some of those guys. Mr. Thomas was involved with that Penguins organization
Mm-hmm.
years after my time, but Mr. Reginald Miller, he is the guy that gave me my first start as a football player in organized football. He
Mm-hmm.
turned me into a quarterback. He was uh, a very tough, demanding man,
Mm-hmm.
but the one thing I can always say and appreciate about Reginald Miller is that he was always very interested and concerned about your development. So, he took great pleasure in seeing, those boys that he uh, initiated into the game of football. When we had success, I think he reveled in knowing that he had a piece and a part that he played in making that happen for us. Uh,
Well, I tell you, with Reg, and he was a couple years older than me, but yet he was still my peer. Reg formed a team, and we had guys on that team. One of them, Mike Cobb, went on to play with the Cincinnati Bengals and the Chicago Bears. It was Mike Cobb, a guy by the name of Joe Reed, Jerome Sharper, and so we were all in Reg's backyard. Somehow or another, Reg would find equipment. I don't know where he would get it, and and we took our white T-shirts and put our numbers on, and so that was one of the. And we practiced all summer, and we had one scrimmage, and that would be against St. Pat's, and that was our season, right? But Reg was a character, and with him and a lot of guys, that's where we really started to decide. Okay, well, I'm not going to play for Reg's team anymore. We're going to start looking at some of the other teams, and that's when I decided uh, to go out for McCullough Williams, and it was really interesting. They were practicing up at the YMCA over on I guess that would be considered West Federal Street. It was by Westlake Terrace, and I went in the gym, and Ernie Shavers was
Mm.
sparring, and he hit the bag a couple times, and I decided I don't think I want to play football because I thought I was going to have to deal with Ernie Shavers, right? So so I missed that season, but the next season I came back and played. Yeah.
So tell us about that McCullough Williams Tigers team because I'd never heard of them prior to you bringing that organization up, and I know the landscape of what was little league or midget league football was different than the era that
Hmm.
I grew up in. So could you
Well,
kind of touch on that and give us a little bit of background of what youth football is for your era of growing up?
Yeah, well, Volney Rogers was the league that we played in, and it was a 105-pound weight limit at that particular time. And McCullough Williams was a team that I wanted to play for because I can remember seeing Ricky Robinson and Tommy Cecil walking down the street. My grandmother's house down on Wallace Street, and I'd see, and they would have these really nice uniforms, and I said, "Boy, that's the team that I want to play for." And so it was on the north side, and had the McCullough Williams. He was a mortician, and he sponsored the teams. And I played with them for 4 years of my youth, and what a great experience. We had a lot of players that came through there, and we won some championships. And the great thing about that, again, was Big Jim Fortune was the big team coach. And from that, his wife and my mom became really good friends, and we had friends for life. And the Fortunes were very, very involved in my life with my sister and I. And we owe a lot to them about it. Now, as far as the teams were concerned, we were bad. We came down to Volney Rogers and we kicked butt. It was a great experience. And as they say, we didn't take no prisoners when we were there.
How old were you when you were playing for McCullough Williams?
I started off. I was 9, and I ended playing when I was 13. Yep,
Okay.
13, going into Princeton with us. Yeah. So we played in those teams, and during that time frame, we won a couple championships and had some undefeated seasons, and it was really a great experience. The one thing that at McCullough Williams, and I don't know if they did this with the other teams, is that you really had to earn your way. There were no participation trophies. If you received the trophy at the banquet, you earned it. And my first year, we talking about Eddie Thomas and Jody McCullough, and Jeff London was there. We were all living on Princeton, and our parents used to carpool to take us over to the north side. And so we were practicing, and I still was a little hesitant, and they took my equipment from me, literally on the field. They said, "Give me your helmet, your shoulder pads. You can't play any football." And I got angry, and boom, I threw my helmet and shoulder pads down and said, "Hey, I want your girdle pads and your pants the next day." So the next day I got in the car with my friends, took my equipment, the final piece of equipment, and gave it to them, and stayed and watched the practice. And they gave my equipment to this guy by the name of Anderson Betters. And
You still remember his name, huh?
oh, yo, I still remember his name. And so I wasn't going to quit. So I'd get in the car with my buddies. They would full uniform and go to practice, and I would just stand on the sideline. So we had a scrimmage, and the nose tackle got hurt, and he ran out. And the coaches were attending to him, and I ran in the game with no equipment on, and played 4 downs without the equipment until the guy, and I don't know how they didn't see me in the game. And I took a face mask to my left, underneath my left eye, and that's when I came running out of the game. And Big Jim, he was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I want to play. I want to play." And the next day, I came home, and they had brought the equipment over to my house, and so got my game uniform, and by the fourth game of the season, I was starting, and the next year, I was most valuable player for the team.
So let me ask you. I got a couple questions there.
Hmm.
So number one, was that exchanging equipment? Was that common? Was that something that happened periodically?
Yeah, that was something that happened periodically. I don't know how often, but I know it happened to me. I was
So would
determined not to ever let that ever happen to me again.
would guys quit
Oh yeah,
if that?
guys would quit. Yeah, guys would quit. Um, guys would quit. They got their equipment taken from them. But I know I became laser focused that, once I got my equipment back, that was never going to be taken away from me. And by the way, during that year, I had a couple chances to knock Anderson Betters around too in practice.
Yeah, I bet you remembered that. Um,
Yeah.
so it just kind of, the reason I ask is like it strikes me as every generation kind of feels like, oh, back in my day, right?
Hmm.
Like, um that strikes me as, first, like that probably wouldn't happen in today's society.
Oh no, it wouldn't.
Um and if it did, guys would just quit, be
Hmm.
done. And so I just kind of wonder what the dynamic was of how, that kind of flipped a switch in you. Like you said, I was determined to never have that happen again. Um, so I just wonder if that was maybe like a generational thing, the stick to itiveness, the kind of like flip that switch of being angry, or if it was just maybe your personality.
No, I think it was a generational thing.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, we the coaches would somewhat in today's environment they would say it to be abusive. They would grab your face mask.
Oh yeah.
You grab your face mask, you get popped upside your head. Now, one of the things that they didn't do, they never swore at us, and they never belittled us in a sense. Now, some people would say, "Hey, they took your equipment right there in front of everybody. You had just literally on." But I always knew that I felt this way, that they were just motivating me, that I
Mhm.
wasn't giving them everything that I needed to do. And I made sure from that standpoint that those guys never said that to me again. And went on. And like I said, I finished out the year. And the next year, I was the most valuable player on that team.
There's a lot to be said for that type of rearing, if you will, because um, when we talk about that time period, we talk about the structure of the city. You're not just being parented by who's in your household; it's a community parenting, and then coaches are trusted individuals in that day and age. So to be challenged by a man, he essentially, it sounds a little rough for today's kids, but for the period that we grew up in and the men that were in charge of us, the men that we were uh, in close proximity and contact with, that was just the flavor of the day.
Yeah.
You want to turn these young men into men that can lead households, families, and control their environment. So when you say that, it doesn't strike me as odd, or it doesn't make me look and go, oh man, those coaches were rough, because Reg had that same style of coaching with us. There were times where kid is out of line, not doing what he's supposed to do, maybe talking back, giving a little bit too much lip to a particular coach, or hey, give me my uniform back, hit the gate.
Yeah. 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 It was a good experience, and it helped prepare me for life too, to know that the security, the only security that you have in life is your ability to produce. And so with that in mind, I always kept that at heart, and that was one of the driving forces with me in my life, being able to produce, for security for my family, as well as myself.
Now, as you shift away from that lower level of little league football and enter into Princeton, um,
Hmm.
now, and we've talked about this with various other individuals. That junior high is seventh, eighth, and ninth during
Hmm.
um, your teen years.
Yeah.
So that is seventh and eighth grade football a thing at those schools, or do you have to wait until ninth grade to be able to play for the school?
Well, when I was at Princeton, that was the team that I played on was the second team that the school ever had in terms of football. Basketball is a different story, but as far as having a football team, so there were some eighth graders that were on our team. We didn't have anybody that was from the seventh grade that was playing. Most of those guys still continued to play. You had McCullough Williams, Buckeye, and then at that time, you had the Southside Warriors, and J&J. Um, uh, it was a cleaners called J&J, and they started the team, and that was down around, I think, Pemberton Park. I believe that's where they practice at. Uh, and so it was basically eighth and ninth grade. And with us, that first year, uh, Princeton didn't really have a great team, and I mean, when I say a great team, they didn't have a good team, and so you had a core group of my friends. We were all with McCullough Williams, and we had just won a championship, and so we told the guys, well, next year when we come, we're going to win the championship. And sure enough, that happened. Well, we tied Hillman for the city series, and it was a good core group of guys. Fonzo Underwood, and again Jody McCullough, um, to name a couple of the guys. And
Now, now with that setup, because when you're talking about this is it's a little foreign for people my age and younger because
Mhm.
they don't understand the reach and the number of schools that are uh, available at that time. So when you talk about what is junior high football or ninth grade football,
Mhm.
you have Princeton, you have Hellman,
Mhm.
Northfield's a team, Westfield's a team, uh, and
Yeah, there
is
was
Boney playing yet or no?
Volney. There was West, and there was Volney. Let's see. Rand had a team. East, North, West, Volney, Princeton, and Hillman. Yeah. So
So
that.
so that's like a 8 team league.
Hmm. Yeah, Princeton and Hillman. Yep. And the Princeton and Hillman, we dominated for years, both in football and basketball. And it was just something. You had two feeder schools going in the South, and it never clicked. At least during my era that I was there, the South started playing, and really good is when Bob Stoops started coaching there, and that's when they really took off for that 4 or 5 years with them.
And why do you think that was? I mean, obviously there's some great talent to come through those halls from both. Do you think there's any specific reason that it just didn't click?
Well, there was a couple things, and I can give you a comparison to, because I experienced North in versus South. In North, there was a discipline. There was a discipline that, we're
Mhm.
Bulldogs. Uh, we come from a different breed, And even though we didn't have a great team, that you could still feel that there. Um, at South, they just didn't seem on the football side that a great culture was built. Now, South had great teams in the 60s. And then in the 70s, with Tony Bell and my cousin Butch McElroy, those guys they were decent. And then there was 7-8 year period where it just it well it comes down, the organization wasn't there. Now you bring in a Bob Stoops. He comes in and right away he demanded the attention of the players. He understood what he wanted. He understood that he had the pedigree of winning. So if you listen to me and what I'm trying to show with you, you'll get from point A to point B. That was there. That was there during my tenure, and they tried to. Our coach was Alan Bogan. Love him dearly. Okay, but he just couldn't. It was not there. And the talent was there, because when you have two feeder schools that dominate, um, there's something, it should continue in the high school level. Now, North, they had a universal gym. It was set up where you can go in and you can work out. You had film sessions. South had the best facility in town. They had their own field, had a field house, and 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 so it, it just there wasn't a lot of film work. There wasn't a lot of um, weight work. Preparing with the weight rooms and stuff. And so there was a lot of guys uh, that were very talented but never reached their potential, because at the end of the day, you're still a bunch of kids and you got to be led at that point.
And so when you go into South, how big is South, and what's kind of a class size or a graduating class size to your best guess?
Um, Man, at that point, South at that time, there were three divisions. You had the AAA, double A, and single A.
Okay.
And South was a AAA school, and there was only one double A school, high school, and that was North. North was the smallest school. So South's graduating class at that point, at that time, was between 300 to 500 kids.
Wow.
Uh, and so they determined what uh, ranking you would be, division you would be, based on the number of boys or students, but especially on the football team, guys that were in enrollment at that school. So South was a AAA team, and it to me was a sleeping giant. It was very interesting. I wrote a paper when I was in college about waking up the sleeping giant, and you had four little league teams, you had two junior high school feeding teams, then you had the high school, and at at North you had McGuffey, the little league team. And those guys, when they were growing up, they knew the next step was to play at Science Hill and then become a Bulldog. And that was something that they lived and breathed, those that were the athletes. Whereas on the South Side, there was just a lot more activity. It was just a lot more activity. And so, if football wasn't one of your focus, you could get pulled in a lot of different directions.
And so, thinking about how things are today, even back in the 90s, 80s, and you talking about Princeton and Adams, were the private schools, specifically probably Mooney at that point in time, because I think there
Hmm.
was a divider between Ursuline and Mooney where you could go. Was Mooney a factor in some of those guys going in different directions?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's something we asked. Our team, when we played at Princeton, we both won. Well, we were co-champs in football, and we won the title in basketball. And uh, Mooney came a knocking. I was recruited, had my tuition paid for. Uh, Jody, uh, Robert Carper, Al May, those guys went. Joe Croft was behind us, but Joe went, and then sure some of the Morrow brothers went and played at Mooney. So yeah, that was a big factor, and we were the first. Uh, we were the first class when there was that massive, uh, I guess you say, transfer portal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't go. Uh, my mom's youngest sister, which was 3 years older than me, she says, "You can't sell us out." She was a graduate of South, and she says, "You can't sell us out." And then at the end of my high school years, I ended up still not graduating from South, and went to North. But yeah, they came. They came.
So what we're talking about the fall of '72 when
Hmm.
you're entering in the South. Um, the class of the City Series is at that time it's the Cheney teams and the North teams are really having a really good run during that part of the '70s. I believe you have Sherman Smith quarterbacking over at North 70, 71. Um, and then that's the first time that North is able to grab a city title because, as you mentioned earlier, that area was known as Scienceville High School, and then
Science Hill, yeah, well, it was Scienceville, and then became Science Hill became the junior high.
right, and then
With
so
the
in '45 they annexed what was Scienceville over to the city and
hmm
rename it North,
hmm
and they start playing football under that moniker. Now
hmm
they don't have a whole lot of success and a whole lot of great football history. Their claim to fame is this 64 game losing streak over a period of 9 years, and then all of a sudden you have this emergence in the early '70s where they're actually competing. And as you said, they're a double A school going up against triple A schools in the rest of their league. So when you go over there as a player and it's your senior year, you I can imagine that you're wanting to make the most out of your short time there. What is that environment like? And when I ask that question, I'm kind of curious as to what is the offensive structure of the day. Are you guys influenced by Wishbone? Is it the beer? Is everybody still running eye? What does football look like in '74 uh,
Well,
in
when
terms of the city league?
okay, well, when I got there, I had uh, I'm my family had a lot of influence over at North. My cousins, the McElroy family. I don't know if you heard of them. I'm dropping names: John McElroy, Mookie, and Bunky, and those guys. So I knew about North, and plus I had a real good friend. His name's Bill Hully, and so Bill had left South, and he's actually his dad is in the Hall of Fame at North, or was considered one of North's greats running backs. So Bill was there. So the transition was really simple for me. Now, in terms of the offense that we ran an I offense, a triple I, and also had the the we ran those options with our wing back. Um, but at that time, you didn't do a lot of passing. I think uh, Cheney was in my era was the school that we had Matt Kavanaugh and Ron Calcagney. They did a lot of passing. East was pretty good too. But when I got to North, we were more, you know, what is it? Well, 2 yards in a pile of dust type offense. Yeah, yeah.
So
Now,
some of those
now,
guys on that team. So Maurice Harris is your quarterback.
yep. Scoopy was our quarterback, and Scoopy had a big responsibility because from 70 down to 75, there was some really you had Rich Beverly. Then he went from Rich Beverly to Sherman Smith. And then from Sherman Smith, he went to, we called him BB at the time, but he's Reverend Raymond Brown.
Oh
And
yeah,
then, yeah, yeah. And then, so Scoop, he had his work cut out because there was some great, when I mean great, you look, Sherman, many years. I think he probably played 9, 10 years in the NFL. Um, Went down to Miami of Ohio, and he was, very competitive. Took that MAC conference team and were beating some of the Big Ten teams and stuff. But so Scoopy was our quarterback, and our running backs, Bill Hulley and Frank Reddy. And Frank, it was something. North had Earl Taylor. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was arguably the best running back in the 70s, along with Ted Bell. And so they had retired Earl's number, and somehow or another Frank was able to get it the senior year to wear it. So he had his work cut out. I tell you, he was wearing Weenie Taylor's number. But except again, they accept to be in, and the student body. Um, it was I was like one of the people. I mean, there really wasn't a transition. It really wasn't a transition for me. It was just natural. Yeah.
One of the things that kind of interests me about North is it seems like just hearing you talk and kind of reading a couple different things and listening to Ron kind of talk to some guys. I think it really seems like a small kind of tucked in the corner of Youngstown over by the Sharon Line there. It seems like a small, tight-knit community, small school environment that you'd kind of see today. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, and there would be a couple people would say, "How are you going to speak for us, Darryl Kimbrough?" Like that's Darla Brown and Bunny Gatewood, and it's like even on Facebook, it's a tight knit community. I mean, really tight, and even on Facebook, that Darla Brown and Bunny, they keep in contact with classmates that have graduated in the 40s, and they communicate with them. And one of the reasons I believe is that, again, it's out in the Sharon Line. It sort of was a country setting to some extent. It wasn't like the Southside, okay? And the people there just formed a community, and then they surrounded that football team. And when you say travel, you hear about, say, certain colleges. Oh, well, they like Ohio State. Oh, they travel well. Boy, the Bulldogs travel well. Okay, when we went into other places, we had that community was behind us, and so they formed a sense of bond with the players, and it was something, and it's really unique, and it's still going on to this day, even though there isn't a high school. They're still having Hall of Fame inductions, sports Hall of Fame inductions, I think, or in with sports and achievements for the classmates. Yeah.
Um, I think so. A couple things to your point. I think that's what this is about. For that Ron and I have talked about is
Hmm.
the greater um, those handful of people know about North High School, know some of the stories you're talking about with South, but but it's really only a corner. And so there's people that are interested in the stories and the life experiences and so on. And so, I
Hmm.
mean, we've been trying to get somebody from North. A number of people. Ron's been beating the doors down on people to try and get to speak
Well,
up. So, um, secondly, so you mentioned about the size of South. One of the things that I was interested in, comparison. How many kids were in a graduating class, maybe at North, then compared to the South piece?
oh, well, my graduating class was 125 students.
Okay, so very small,
It was very
tight.
small.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was very small. It was very small, and you know, uh, we did a lot of things as far as the community is concerned, and being from the South Side, most of my life, we were able to even get together and have our prom and after prom. So that way, I was North had their prom the same day as South, and I was like, whoa. I can't go with my other friends, so let's just combine together. And then we had the prom together and everything, and so it was a great experience. Yeah.
Uh, can I ask about that? Because like
Hmm.
um, during my experience in Youngstown growing up, things had become so territorial and side of town oriented that
Hmm.
it's kind of unfathomable to think that two schools could combine a prom together.
Hmm.
So, in your opinion, is there a different type of care for others during your time growing up as a young person versus what came afterwards?
Yeah, we it was just in the entire city. It was just you know y- put it this way: if there was some disagreements, you would always hear, "Oh, we would just fight and then we would be friends afterwards." Okay. There was not a lot of in my life experience. Okay, and I've been all over town. There wasn't a lot of violence. People seemed to mend together, and so it was a little different. Uh, you know, hearing about gangs,
Mm.
I never knew of any gangs growing up. You had your clique of people that you hung around, but there was never an organized gang where this is my turf and that's your turf. That's just wasn't happening at that time.
Now, delving a little bit into that '74 season at
Hmm.
North. Again, you're the starting center and you're playing defensive tackle for this team. To put things in perspective, Cheney goes 10-0 that season,
Hmm.
doesn't make the playoffs. You mentioned Dennis Mosley, who was, awesome running back and great football player at Rand, going on
Hmm.
Iowa and making his mark there. You have great talent at all schools, as I can imagine, but you guys start out week one going over to play Brookfield, and
Hmm.
you walk out of there with a 6-0 loss.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
tell me about that?
Yeah. Well, that game that we played in Brookfield, our offense just wasn't clicking, and we had issues with the special teams. And what happened was they had a block punt, and uh, they recovered it inside our 5 yard line, and we did our best. It was 4th and goal, but they scored, beat it 6-0, and that's what happened. It was just with the special teams, and that occurred in the Brookfield game as well as the East game. Same thing, a block punt, and that's what turned it around. We were one play here, or a catch here from going into the city series is undefeated, because our next game we went down and uh, we played in Canton, and I think we lost by 2 points in that Canton game. Uh, but our offense took off. Bill Hulley rushed for over 100 yards. Um, Frank Reddy. We actually had two running backs that were over 100 yards that game. And there's a gentleman, he's going to laugh when he sees this. His name is we call him Junie, Junie Washington. He was a wide receiver, and we were mounting a comeback against a Canton late in the game, and so we didn't have any timeouts, and we wanted to get down within the 25-yard line, because Frank Reddy was automatic from that standpoint, and so it'd be a 30-yard field goal, and so coach said, gave us, we were calling double plays to, catch the ball, get out of bounds. Well, we were just about getting ready to get in the field goal range, and Scoopy threw a hitch pass out to Junie. Junie saw stars in the eyes. Instead of going out of bounds, he turned it back up in, and we ran out. The clock ran out, and so it's funny. I teased Junie today. I said, I teased him today. I said, man, you stopped us from going to the state, and he laughed about that. He said, man, he said, I was trying to get a scholarship. I wasn't thinking about you all. Yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah.
as that season progresses, so you guys start off. It looks like the first 5 games, they're all losses, but like you said, some of them are very closely contested contests.
Oh yeah.
Um, you touch on something that I'm just kind of curious about, because you have that AAA level, which is the equivalent of what is Division 1 in this era, and
Mm-hmm.
then so playoffs begin in 1972 in Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have these area teams that are powerhouses, and getting to display how great Northeast Ohio football is, and especially Youngstown at that time. You
Mm-hmm.
have Reserve winning a championship, Harding winning a championship, and Mooney
Mm-hmm.
winning a state title as well.
Mm-hmm.
So and because you uh, were of that era, and have a reference point, do you feel like football was better without playoffs, and just having it decided in a 10-game season with maybe a bonus game for league titles and such, or did you guys want to be a part of the playoff system, and try to get those state championships?
Oh yeah. I preferred the playoffs, because this methodical state champions. That's just you know whoever has the most influence with the media. But championships should be played on the field. You hear about the Massillon Tigers and and all of their state champions, right? And they were
Yeah.
just methodical champions, right? They
Yeah.
once the playoffs came, they weren't, and so I think that the playoff system. Now, the one thing that I did not like or could not understand was the computer rankings that were in play that they were using when we were in school. Now, for North, it would have benefited North because the majority of the teams, out of the 10 teams uh, we played 6 or 7 that were AAA. Okay, so that would have weighed more if you had victories. That would have weighed more in the computer rankings. Okay, as opposed to for the AA era. But South in 1979 or 80 was 10-0, and they still didn't. They still didn't make the playoffs. Um, and they still didn't make the playoffs. So it looks like I'm following it, but not as close as I did when I lived there. But it seems like now there's a lot of divisions, man, and these guys Mooney and it seems like they're in the state championship or making a deep run in the playoffs every year.
Well, that the whole dynamic is like you said is completely changed. It's now there's 7 divisions,
Mm-hmm.
and it's extremely complicated math in terms of where you go to school and middle school and transfer in. But I want to say, I think at that time, and Ron, correct me, you probably only had 2 teams that made it from a region in the playoffs. And currently, we're at 16 teams
Right.
per region, and
Okay.
there's 4 regions per division.
Mm-hmm.
So it was extremely difficult to make the playoffs,
Oh yeah.
probably up until mid to late 90s, if not the early 2000s. It was really, really difficult. So there were a lot of 10-0 teams that didn't make it,
Mm-hmm.
should have made it. But yeah, to your point, you're 100% right.
Yeah.
Now, after high school wraps up for you, you go
Mm-hmm.
on to Morgan State to attend college.
Mm-hmm.
What's that experience like of
Well,
um,
couple
ending
things.
your athletic pursuits and then
Mm-hmm.
shifting into being uh, essentially a non-organized athlete?
Well, that was a transition. That when you talk about going from south to north, leaving Youngstown and going to Baltimore and not being in a team setting, that was different. That was different. Took me a couple years to uh, go from Darryl the football player to Darryl the student. But the experience at Morgan State, just, boy, it was very valuable. During that time, some of my classmates went on to do really great things, congressmen and lawyers and things of that nature. But just to be with a lot of different people in their formative years, it was really a great experience, especially at HBCU.
Now, what are you pursuing when you enter school there?
Business administration. Yep, yep. Business administration, and that's when I left there. That's it placed me into some great opportunities, and went on from that standpoint to um, start my career. And yeah.
And so where does that take you?
Currently,
No,
or
sir.
from
Just your progression through your professional career. So you
well,
you
my
earn your
my
degree
profession.
and then
Yeah, my professional career has been in in two, well, three, actually three different industries. From 1980, when I got my first job, worked in the banking industry, manufacturing, and in the transportation industry. And so the bulk of my career, over 17 years, has been in transportation. And currently, I'm the director of operations for a company called Final Mile Solutions Group. We're a division of the R&R Express out of Pittsburgh, and we handle the final mile of the life of furniture delivery. So you've heard Ashley Furniture, Marlowe Furniture, and some of the other high end um, uh, restoration hardware.
Mm.
I'm the director of operations for that in the Mid Atlantic region.
And are you able to apply those lessons from football to those different
Oh,
areas?
Absolutely. It applies from Morgan State to I mean, just my whole life experience. But the one thing from my football experience is that I'm a leader of men, and I learned that on the gridiron. Okay, and so uh, and so yeah. A lot of times they'll laugh and say, "Well, we're getting ready to get a pep talk," But when we have our stand-ups, well, now I don't do it as much anymore. We have when direct reports do that, but yeah, it taught me how to be a leader of men, and and my my closest bonds in my life, as I stated, mentioned Eddie Thomas. We just lost Jody, but those guys have been my friends all my life, all my life, and that's it. All started on the gridiron. You know, we lost Reg, um, but and he's one of my great friends as well. Mhm.
What do you think, if you could kind of sum up, um, having that experience as a player,
Mhm.
um, and now as a leader of men in the professional industry, um,
Mhm.
how would you describe probably the most important thing that you've taken from the gridiron to the professional career? What's that one trait or lesson that you would say has made the most impact on you?
It's a couple things, and I don't want to sound cliche-ish, but it's true. Um, to uh, be able to make a decision on a split second. So a lot of times, as when you're playing, especially in my position, I used to have to call the blocking schemes, and you be in the midst of the game and knowing what the flow is, your opponent. One things that I always say to our teams that are delivering furniture and with me is know your product and know your customer. And that's the same thing from watching film, knowing who you're going to play against, their tendencies, developing an edge, and a lot of times too, have a little friendly edge, being able to, and what I mean by that is you have competition with. There were a lot of bigger companies. At one point, I worked for DHL for many years, and before that, it was Airborne Express. So we would have to be Airborne Express was of the three overnight carrier companies. You had FedEx, UPS, and then there was Airborne Express. Well, Airborne was sort of like the little brother of those guys, and so having gamesmanship out on the ramp to be able to get your aircraft in so that you'll be able to unload and not have to wait for 6 or 7 DC-9 aircraft so that you can get in and get your freight out on time. Well, you learned those things playing football, knowing how to strategize, running plays, and I looked at it in that aspect. Always being able to be able to sit down and flow chart things. Same thing as running your plays, and so that's what the sports and in football and in basketball too. But for the most part, football was the game that I really love. Those are the things that I learned from that.
To go from the guy that had his equipment taken to running in on the field and playing without a helmet, almost back to the days of the early parts of football where you're just out there tackling with nothing on. you
Yeah.
know, um, Having a transition from one side of town to the other and starting anew as a senior, and then going on to apply those lessons to become mature, to be a leader of men. If you had one more down, if you had one more chance to go back, strap it up, put yourself in some equipment, where would that be at? Who would be with you? Set that up for us.
Well, we'll be right back at North High, and we will be playing South. Okay, because that we will be playing South because that year South spanked us, and so being from the South Side, that was really tough, right? To hear, especially after the game, you hear from the stands, "Hey, Kimbrough," just friendship. But I'd like to strap back up, have my guy Frank Reddy and Scoopy and there's a guy during this whole time that I didn't mention, but his name's Leonard Hightower. Leonard, that he was one of the linebackers. Leonard and Nate Queener, and and so those guys there, Hully, Frank Reddy, Scoopy, uh, Leonard Hightower, Nate Queener, as I said, one other guy, Sylvester Rozier. I'd like to get back with them. And we would also, I don't know if I'll let Junie come back on because Junie would probably want to go for, Junie would want, when we need to go out of bounds to kill the clock, Junie would probably still want to try to score a touchdown.
It's been great, sharing this time with you and getting to hear, what um, we've always wondered about in terms of what North was. And to me,
Mhm,
what I
mhm.
take from, your explanation of it is, it's its own uh, part of Youngstown. The people are galvanized and bonded together. And even though sometimes you may not always come up on the winning side when the clocks hit zero, you go back to a community that cares about you and loves you. So you're able to win in other areas and you're not putting all those eggs into one basket. And to me, that's what football does. It just gives you an avenue, it gives you a pathway to experience adversity and find out who you are on the inside. So I appreciate you joining us tonight and giving us that perspective. I thought your story was awesome. I thought you did a great job of really taking us into that time period of what Youngstown City football was.
I also mentioned too, again, with the East Side and the Sharon line. Um, you wanted to talk to some other individuals, Darla Brown, um, uh, Bunny Gatewood, and then are you familiar with Andre Brown? There's a Drew Brown. I think that he's the athletic director down at the YMCA. I- so those individuals, and of course Mike Cobbs is waiting on deck to talk with you.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna get back with him because we definitely want to give him his due and his time. I
Yeah.
enjoyed our conversation that we had, and I would love to
Okay.
capture it in this setting.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. It was really great meeting you, Dallas, and seeing you too, Ron. And I really thank you very much for taking time to talk to me.
Yeah, thank
Yes, sir.
you. Much appreciated. Thank you.
All righty. Take care, guys. Bye bye.
All right.